All righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited for our conversation today. You are in for a treat. We've had to reschedule a couple times now. So, all of this time has built up and we're finally here. I'm so happy to introduce you to Master Arthur Levitan. Welcome, Arthur.
Thank you.
So good to see you. And I know we just had the chance to connect last week. We had a lovely conversation. I already, without knowing you for very long, appreciate you so much and who you are and how you are in the world. But for those of you that don't know Master Arthur Levitan, he is, first of all, he has battle tested the philosophy he spent decades learning through the study and application of the ancient wisdom of Taoism, of which he is one of the only ordained masters in the West. And he just mentioned that he's both a priest and a master of Taoism. Master Levitan found not only a path towards survival, but a means to living a life of contentment. Based in Boston, he is a modern teacher in a lineage that has been passed exclusively from teacher to student for over 2,500 years. As one of the few Taoist masters in the Western world, Master Levitan is in a unique position of having both the knowledge and authority to translate this complicated ancient wisdom into proper modern form. His school, Quantum Tao, since 2009, emphasizes practical daily applications of Tao and the practice of Qigong with the goal of simplifying the principles of Tao in order to make them useful for Americans in their everyday life. I love it. And I missed your title up top, Spiritual Taoist Teacher, Crisis Management, which I know we've talked about, and I'm actually excited to hear more about that today. And then also a founder and entrepreneur. So you have walked many paths, Arthur.
I have. It feels like so many lifetimes.
I bet.
Definitely. I have no
Yeah.
idea how it all gets packed into so few years.
Oh, that is a fascinating thing that happens. I mean, I'm in my late 40s now. I have a sister in a mid 40s, and we were chatting just this morning, and we were talking about something that only happened 2 years ago, but in its own way. I asked her, I said, does that feel like a lifetime ago? And she was like, yes, strangely it does. And it is fascinating how, like, you look back. I mean, I even think back about who I was in my 20s, getting out of law school. I went through a divorce in my 20s, and like that feels like multiple lifetimes ago, right?
Right.
So it is interesting, I think, how many of those transitions in life we go through where it's like, how, in some ways, how have we lived all these lives?
And it almost feels like it was a different person.
Yeah.
And it was.
Ugh.
It was absolutely a different person. And one of the mistakes we make is that we tend to hold on to the decisions we made in our 20s as if they're current,
Mm,
right? But we've changed.
yeah.
And the way we look at life changed, and the way we make decisions changed. And all that experience is showing us that we would have made a very different decision,
Yeah.
but we're still holding on to those decisions.
Mm. That
So,
is so profoundly true. I think about even what I've learned. You and I, before we went live just now, we were talking about the journey of being parents and dealing with the health of your little people, trying to shuttle them through those early years of life. And I was just reflecting on the fact that I had no idea how much of my time and energy and mental resources that would take. And yet the transformation I've gone through in the last couple years around how I view the contributors to health, or alternatively to unwellness, is so dramatically different than I saw
mhm.
it even 4 years ago, even 5 years ago, certainly a decade or two decades, right? So it can, I mean, the the potential for such massive paradigm shifts. I mean, it's amazing. I think it really speaks to human potential.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And each journey is individual, right?
Mhm.
We all look alike, we all talk alike, we eat similar foods and everything, we breathe the same air, but each journey is so individual. And that's at the foundation of Taoism is the individual journey is the most important one,
Mm,
while living among others.
yeah.
So you're not running away from others. You are living among others and you're enjoying living among others because that is part of our design and taking advantage because the most joy you get is when you're flowing within your design.
Mm,
The things that you were supposed to do, right? If you do something for work that you really, really enjoy, it doesn't feel like work. If you're moving in the right direction in your life, that is the right direction for you, may not be for the person standing next to you, but the right direction for you, it feels the most joyful. You don't feel like you're working or you're struggling or anything. This is amazing. And you're excited to wake up.
mm,
You're excited when you go to bed and everything. And a lot of people don't take the time to actually figure that out for themselves,
mm,
right? We follow the path that was prescribed for us, either by our parents or by the place we live in, and we never take the time to actually think about that.
yeah.
And I think that's very important for individual contentment and just for being able to enjoy this life.
Mm. It's so significant what you've just said about flowing and having it be consistent with your individual design. I was actually thinking about this yesterday. We've had kind of a rough week, both from a health perspective, but I will also say a parenting perspective. My number one has ADHD and some struggles that go along with that. He's an amazing kid, right? But it just means like some everyday things can be quite a challenge. Getting him out the door, transitioning to school, right? These kinds of things. Uh and I was thinking yesterday because it has been kind of a hard week, like how do I shift to a place where I don't let my expectations cause this additional friction. Like how do I get to the place of just being like, this is how it's supposed to be because this is how it is. And
It is a parent that is one of the most difficult things,
mm,
right? And in Taoism, we have the three C's, and they are core, clarity, contentment. It
mm,
is developing a physical core, having mental clarity, and spiritual contentment.
yes.
And what you're talking about right now is clarity
Mm,
and to understand what you're looking at, right? Because a lot of people look at things and because of their expectations and
mm,
assumptions, what's in front of them does not come clearly to their brain.
yeah.
It becomes more confusion or distortion, like ripples in a pond, right? The pond will beautifully reflect the sky unless there's ripples.
Mhm,
And what you're talking about is the struggle a lot of parents have where they mistake the soul of the child as having anything to do with them.
mhm,
Because as physical beings, we make the vessel, and the vessel looks like us, and it sounds like us, and it uses phrases like us. We make the mistake of thinking they're somehow a part of us.
mm.
But the soul that occupies that vessel has nothing to do with you.
Oh no. And I'm clear on that. I having been raised in a large family, 6 kids, and seeing even from a soul perspective, how different our paths are, how what different places we came from and different destinations we're going to. I've always been clear, and it's a little bit weird to describe that my children, in a very strange way, feel more like siblings to me than they do like children. It's like
Right.
I realize I'm here to shuttle them into this physical world and beyond, keeping them safe and generally trying to help them find their best and, most beautiful journey themselves. They are not me. They are not a mini me. And yet I still bump into the kind of the crunchiness sometimes of everyday life where it's like we've got school to go to and appointments to go to and
But
meal,
that's
you know,
fine. That,
right?
that's just part of being a parent. That's
Totally,
that's you
totally.
have to give them opportunities and expose them to different things and
Yeah.
a driver and a chauffeur and a cook and everything else.
Exactly. A nurse, a nighttime nurse, which has happened a lot this week. Well, and it was just in reflecting because my son, we have lots of discussions and he has just the most amazing different aspects of himself. And one is that he's highly motivated. Even though school can be a challenge, he's highly motivated and he has enough awareness to pay attention to grades, to self-advocate when he's not feeling like he like maybe missed the ball on something, like he came home and reported, I've got all A's, but then I got a B minus in this one class. And I was like, sweetie, you're doing a great job. What do you know about that B minus? He's like, I don't know why I have that. And I said, well, maybe you just talk to the teacher and find out. And sure enough, he did on his own, went in and figured and got it changed into a B plus. He learned that he missed an assignment.
Wow.
That in and of itself, and I have to realize like those are really important wins for a kid like him.
Yeah.
And so much of my entire parenting journey has just been about letting go of any way that I think it should be,
Right.
right?
Right. Because
And
then you're trying to control everything. And
totally.
you're spending enormous amount of energy trying to control life, which is uncontrollable. Anybody in a hurricane can tell you that,
Yeah, right. Oh,
unfortunately.
my goodness.
And in Taoism, we always look at death as helping us with life. That we
Mm,
look at life from the perspective of death. And death, Steve Jobs actually had a beautiful graduation speech where he said, "It is death that defines life, that helps
mhm,
us understand life." And that actually is foundational in Taoism.
mm,
And basically, we look at death in a way like, if this was my last day, because it can be,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
This is
man.
the one thing we have no control over. With all our doctors and science and everything you can imagine, we have no control over this. And that is beautiful
Yeah.
because it helps us not waste energy on things we shouldn't be meddling with.
Mm,
So the more you try to control life, the more energy you're spending, the less you're getting in return,
that's
right?
right.
And it never goes your way, no matter what happens. And even if it does, how do you know that was the right way?
Yeah.
So let's just
Well,
say
this is
you
it. This is it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. How do you know that it was the right way anyway?
you don't.
You just know
I
you
mean,
don't.
my old teacher used to say, we have no idea as being very mortal, these little tiny mortals that live tiny, tiny lives. We have no idea what's good and bad in the moment.
Yeah,
Win the lottery, and it turns out that nobody who won the lottery turned out well,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
Lose some sort of either a court case or a situation or lose money. And it turns out it was the best moment of your life because it led to very unexpected, amazing things.
Yes. That's
You
right.
know, for me personally, on my own journey, at 36, I had a heart attack. And
Mm,
I was sure this was the end of my life as I know it.
mm,
That moment of humility gave me such access to such a path in life that I would never be able to ever experience without it. And I'm so grateful for it. And one would
yeah.
think, why would you be grateful for a heart attack? I am, because the life I've had afterwards is completely different than the journey I was on before that. And the
Mm,
realizations I had in those moments could not be had intellectually. They
yeah.
had to have been experienced,
Yeah.
right? And it was beautiful. Like, not in the moment,
No.
it's stuck. Uh, and that for about a year after. But having perspective, having years and years and years afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, that was an inflection point. And that was actually a phenomenal inflection point.
Mm,
So, right. So when we try to control life, we have no idea which way is right or wrong in the moment. And that is
Yeah.
another way of not wasting energy. Since you have no idea, why bother trying?
That's right. That's right. And how many times have we learned that life has other plans for us anyways, right? Even when we're striving towards something that's good or seems like the right path. So it's such a powerful reminder and such a guide to hang on to, even in those small moments where you're like, am I going to choose the crunchy path with my child in this particular instant, or, make a different choice? Yeah, I love it so much. And I think it's something that we all need to return to way more often than we realize. I would love to hear about your roots, about your path in Taoism. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where do you come from? How, I know we can't cover the whole story, but give us a little bit of the maybe your own inflection points up to this point about your own path.
I've had several, or more than
Mm.
several. So quick. My parents immigrated to this country in 1981 from what was then the Soviet Union,
Oh, wow.
Ukraine,
Yep.
actually. And as immigrants, they bought into the notion of the American dream because it was so opposite and unavailable in the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, the ambition or the understanding of money was villainized. It was you
Mm.
shouldn't be trying to make money. You should be earning as much as everybody else, and that's it. So when they came here and they walked into supermarkets and were astounded, and they walked into homes and were astounded, they wanted to have a piece of the American dream, which frankly is wonderful. Um, but the consequence of that is that I grew up listening to the mantra of make money and you will be happy.
Um,
And that was the mantra I grew up with. So by the time I was 18, 19, I started my first business. And by the time I was 21, I had 50 people working for me. And I remember buying myself an apartment. And this was the immigrant jackpot, right? I mean, at a very early age, having your own place. And I remember being in that apartment, and one night, I remember thinking, I've made it. I've got the car, I've got the apartment, I've got the business, and I'm miserable. Well, why am I miserable? Well, what is happening here? What's wrong with this? This was supposed to culminate in happiness, and it hadn't. Now, maybe I'm just a miserable person, which is very possible, um, or miserable because I'm doing things that were not right for me. And I didn't know what the answer was. I had no idea. And remember, I had this thought to myself, you should try the Eastern path because the Western path you've done, you have the bank account to show that you've done it, but it's not working the way you would want it to work, right? And the only thing I knew about the Eastern Path was kung fu movies, and I remember I liked them, but who didn't? So, and I said okay, and I went to bed. And the next day, this person comes in to an interview at my work, and I'm interviewing him and everything. And I said, in the end of the interview, very uncharacteristic of me, because I usually never dive into people's personal life. I asked, "Hey, what else do you do?" And he looks at me and he thought about it. And he said, "Well, I'm a Buddhist teacher." No, like that's impossible. I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, somebody's putting me on, the universe is putting me. This is insane. Turns out he was. So I said, "Are you taking students?" He's like, "I am." And I wound up studying with him for 7 years. I wound up following the Buddhist path, including some of the practices like fasting. And my last fast before I stopped being a Buddhist was 22 days. And that was one of my inflection points in my life where that 22 days, and I was going to go for 30, but my mother kept calling and she was just in a horrible place. She's like, "You haven't eaten, you're going to kill yourself." And I said, "All right, all right, all right, I'll stop." Even though I felt great. It was an amazing, incredible experience. Not that I recommend it for everybody because it took me 5 years to build up to those 22 days.
Yeah.
I started with one day and built up from there. Um, and that changed my life because everything changed from then on. I realized the Buddhist path was not for me. I had no idea what was, But in literally in a couple of days later, I got a phone call, and the man said, "There's a house that's available. If you want to buy it, you can flip it if you want, and everything else." And I said, "Okay." Didn't even ask where, and I didn't know why I said okay. And it wound up being across from a Taoist temple. And so when people say, "How did you plan your? How did you do this? You're so wise, etc." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I just say yes for some reason to crazy people, which is not a great trait." And so I wound up one day, and I'm not going to get into everything, but I wound up walking across the street, and that changed my life because not
Mm,
only was there a Taoist Grand Master with a lineage that was uninterrupted, and that's important because in the Eastern philosophy, it is the transmission from master to student that is most important. And if that gets broken, kind of all the practices and all the nuances leave, and you have to
mm,
start over, as opposed to standing on the shoulders of giants for
yeah.
thousands of years, people doing this and expanding on it, understanding it differently, giving their own perspective on it. You have to start from scratch.
Mhm.
And in China, because of the Cultural Revolution, a lot of those paths got cut. A lot of
Mm,
those lineages got cut. So mine thankfully survived. And not only that, but this Grand Master was married to a woman who was a Siberian shaman. So I wound up getting taught by both of them from the male and the female point of view. And that was an incredible, incredible experience, which allows me to work with both energies as
mm,
opposed to being stuck in one perspective.
mm,
So fast forward 2009, I started my school. 2016, after traveling in China for years, I got ordained in the oldest continuously operated Taoist temple in the world in Chengdu, and found myself more and more working with executives, CEOs,
mm,
lawyers, founders. One of the things that gets me most excited because of my own entrepreneurial path, having built companies using the Taoist principles. I help founders navigate the startup world, and essentially, it's all about building resilience in a way
mm,
to understanding the challenges, understanding how to navigate yourself and your
mm.
state through them. So that's very obviously things happen in the middle of all of that, but
Right. Yeah, there's
obviously
a
that's the 30,000 foot view.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm just reflecting on the fact that, like what happens in life when we say out loud, like, what about this? Right? Or maybe I should look over here and the way that things just show up. I mean, it is crazy. And for anybody who's ever done this as an experiment or ever really taken a leap like this, you know what we're talking about. And I think there is something tremendously powerful about saying things out loud, and being clear or even just opening the door to something happening next. And I think the universe loves invitation. I think it loves surprise. It loves to support us, at least my belief. It just wants to know what we want, right?
If we're going in a direction that our soul is pulling us into, right? We're supposed to experience and learn some lessons while we're here.
Hmm.
And when we follow the path that is right for us, amazing things happen almost by magic. And when they don't, that's a great sign that you're not going in the right direction. And the most
Mm,
important thing in that moment, and this is the hardest thing to do as a human being, is not to judge yourself. It's so difficult because that's what we're surrounded with all the time. And the reason for not judging yourself or anybody else for that matter, or anything else,
mm,
is that as soon as you judge something, you subconsciously push away from it. And instead of embracing it and bringing it closer and understanding it and examining it, you subconsciously push away from it. And that then limits your ability to work with it.
mm,
So then you're not listening to yourself. Like you're getting these instincts. Your instincts are telling you these little tiny things, or maybe some big, big bells are going off. And because you've judged yourself, you've pushed those instincts away. So your greatest connection to this world and to your soul are your instincts, and you're not consciously,
Yeah.
right? You've decided that they're not right. So you're constantly second guessing yourself. So the decisions that you think you're making, they're actually not really right for you.
Right.
And
They're
outcomes are.
driven, yes, they're driven by this energetic either repelling of or overly attracted to. It's what comes to mind for me right now is I've got a dear friend who does a lot of shadow work with people, right? And it's this idea of like, and also if you've done any reading, I mean, there's some books I love, Swamplands of the Soul, and some that take you through the process of recognizing that, what people often think of as midlife crisis is this recognition of that push or pull or these false identities because of beliefs like this, judgments like this that create a self that's not really the true self. And that's the joy of these experiences that bring us into crisis, that give us a whole new perspective or potential new direction in life.
Crises are an opportunity.
Yeah.
They're an opportunity because in every opportunity there's a problem, and in every problem there's an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And that's a chance for us to test ourselves out, to see what works and what doesn't, and to most importantly to dispel ideas. But I'd like to get back just a second about what you said, which was, I thought, brilliant. And I'd like to give you another way of looking at it. It's the
Mhm.
same thing, it's just another way of looking at it. So perspective is the most important thing we do in Taoism.
Mhm.
Being able to shift perspectives and to understand things from other points of view is very, very important. So as mammals, when we grow up, each one of us tries to answer a fundamental question. And the question is not conscious, but
Mhm.
we try to answer it anyway. And the question is who do I have to become to get love? Now, we can say this a different way. What do I have to do to survive?
Right, to be safe in the world. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what happens is as we grow up, based on our environment, and everybody's is different, we create this construct that resonates with the answer to that question. And somewhere along the way, we never ever take that construct off because nobody tells us.
Right.
So our soul is our original nature that is behind this curtain of this construct.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it takes a crisis to challenge that construct, right? And that is part of the journey. You cannot avoid that journey. That is very necessary part of it. But in Taoism, we always try to return to our original nature or to our childlike existence
Mm.
before the construct,
Yep. Right.
right?
Before the people pleaser, before the overachiever, before the, right, there's
That
a
wasn't you to begin with,
right,
but
right.
that's what you had to become in order to survive to adulthood,
That's right.
which is normal, which is unavoidable. And if you try to avoid it, you're actually going to be in a much worse place.
Right. And I mean, in summary, like we all do our best to get from there to here, right? And
Right.
now it's about what do we do from here forward?
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Well, I think this shows up for people in so many different ways, and it's such a blessing when people realize this shadow element, this constructed self. I'd love to hear more for folks that are listening and that, might have curiosity but may not know much about Taoism.
Mhm.
I know you've shared a little bit already, but what are there some core principles? Like,
Yeah,
how does Taoism shape your view of the world, of your work? I'd love to hear, some of those cornerstones.
absolutely. I mean, 2,500 years in a couple of minutes.
I know, we're good. We're good. Just pack it in.
Right? So there are fundamentally nine main principles, which we're not
Mhm.
going to get into because that's
9 is my favorite number. I love it
we're
already.
well, there you go. But we're never going to ever. I mean, it will take a while. It would be a Lex Friedman show at that point. Uh, and
We
we,
wo-
and
we
I'm not
won't make you sit through that, but yeah, you can
that's
give
it.
us your favorite
So
parts or one or two
the way that I
highlights.
love to start, because the
Mhm.
original logo or branding for Taoism is the yin yang symbol,
Mhm.
the black and the white. Yes,
Yeah, I know. Well, I've got a little kind of version. I mean, it's
yes,
different, but it's yes.
yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they have some sort of cursory understanding of it, or they think it's about balance, and in a way it is. But it actually describes the whole philosophy in that symbol. And I'll give you a quick run through. The most important aspect of that is that squiggly line between the white and the black says this whole world is made up of opposites pushing and pulling on each other. Day
Mm,
and night create conditions for life. And when opposites push and pull on each other, they create flow. Man and woman create child. That's flow. North and South Pole create the spin of the earth. And we can, the seasons, right, create the push and pull between winter and summer
mhm.
gives the ability for life to thrive here, right? So everything is based on that there is an opposite that's working with it, pushing and pulling. Take one away, and the flow stops. Take a man away from a woman, and vice versa, and there is no child. Take night away from day, and everything burns. Take day away from night, and everything freezes. So, but we do this in our daily lives through our opinions and through our subconscious actions. We try to only work with one aspect and shunning the other aspect.
Well, this is this judgment that you talk about, right? Something's bad, something's good. Let's just do the good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you can let's get rid of those words of judgment and say, I
Yep.
think everything in this life has consequences and benefits, or
Hmm.
benefits and consequences.
That's right.
So you cannot have anything without those two aspects. Otherwise, it's not functioning.
Yeah.
Right? So in Taoism, we always look at what creates stagnation or what creates flow. Flow is created when the opposites are working with each other. Stagnation is created when you get rid of the opposite. So if you're going to be too masculine or too feminine, you're getting rid of the opposite, you're going to be rigid. And you can see this in people who do not benefit from the other energy.
Oh,
They're very
totally.
rigid in their opinions.
Well, and you can see it even, and I know we've talked a little bit about this, but even in the dynamics of men and women in the workplace and putting women in industries that are highly dominated by men and then them taking on very masculine energy in order to try to succeed, right? It's like pushing a boulder up a hill.
Right? And
Yeah.
while doing that, they are giving up their power.
Yeah.
How? Because they're giving up their original nature. The things that give them the most power, that feminine energy, they're giving that up and trying to live another life.
Well, and similarly, men who are in leadership positions and who have that balance of, they understand what it
Right.
means to use feminine energy in balance with masculine energy, such better leaders, listeners, right?
But
Team
also better
supporters.
warriors.
Yes.
Also, people who are adept at using both energies, or at least understanding where their
The
strengths are and
mm,
augmenting themselves with a team that helps them with the other side of it,
mm,
they wind up being underestimated
mm,
because they're not acting like everybody else. And then everybody else underestimates them, and that gives you an enormous amount of power.
I
You
love
always
it.
want to be underestimated.
Mm.
As a warrior, there's nothing better than your opponent underestimating you.
Right? Oh my goodness, isn't that the truth? The number of I just think about that in the context of like my legal career, and I came out of school looking like I was 14, and just was constantly underestimated, constantly. So it's true, it becomes a tremendous advantage.
Yes. Well, when
Mm,
people are underestimating you, they miss the nuances of your behavior because they're not observing you anymore.
mm.
They've made up their mind about that you're weak or you're
Yep.
useless or you're inadequate, and they're no longer focused on you. They're no longer observing you.
Mm.
Hey, that means you can sneak up on them while their eyes are open.
Right. Yeah.
So, and this works in every aspect of life. But there's a whole series of practices. There's a whole, and the reason that Taoism has survived unchanged for three, four
Mm.
thousand years is because it was based on nature. And as far as we
Mm.
understand, nature is permanent, at least as
Yep.
far as we can tell, right?
Yep.
We don't live that long, so and our civilizations are not that long, and our writings are only 5,000 years old. So as far as we know,
Mhm.
nature is permanent. And when you're using principles from something that's permanent, it's like you're building a house on bedrock.
Mm.
And when you're using values that are temporary and change all the time, you're building your house on quicksand. And that is the difference is where is the beginning of your thinking? Is it from a place of permanence, nature, or is it from a place of very temporary society?
Mm.
Right? Our society is constantly shifting its value system in order to keep us off balance.
Oh,
That,
totally.
that is neither good or bad, it just is. In order to make it function, and our society, especially in the West, was designed for maximum interdependence.
Mm.
It was designed to create these very random, highly successful interdependent connections, which highlight ourselves as a species. The reason we became an apex predator on this planet is because our ability to be interdependent with each other.
Mhm.
We didn't have teeth. We couldn't run. We're pathetic.
We are
As animals,
pathetic.
we are so pathetic. Okay? Compared to other we just there's no grace in us. Our young are pathetic until God knows when. I
Right.
mean,
We're not
what happens to
powerful until we're adults. Like
nothing,
everything is wrong. Yes.
nothing. But being interdependent with each other, we can take down a huge, huge mammoth. We can conquer this planet in a way that no other species can. And that the only reason for that is because our interdependence with each other.
Oh, that's right. Well, I just read the book Humankind, and it was fascinating because it touched on some of these points of like why the current version of humans excelled even over Neanderthals, which were stronger, faster, bigger. They were actually smarter than we are, which is interesting because people get that wrong. But they did not play as nicely as we do. We have the
They
friendliness gene, right? And
Well,
that
they didn't
ability,
hug. They didn't
yes,
hug as much. They didn't kiss as much. They
that's
didn't bond
right.
as much.
Yes, this friendliness gene, this ability to be interconnected is actually what allowed us to transmit information so quickly and come
And
up
to
with
augment each
solutions.
other. I'm good at
Yes,
this. You're good at this. Together, we're
we're a
much better
team.
than the sum of the parts, right? So
That's
when
right.
you're building a team in business, and this is what I help with businesses, is how do you create a team that it could be truly interdependent versus a team of resumes,
Yeah. Mm.
right? And that takes effort. That
Oh,
takes
my
a lot
goodness.
of effort.
And in certain industries takes lots of extra effort. I won't name
Yes,
any names.
yes, yes. But
Oh,
what's happening right now in our society and why people are feeling anxiety in particular is those bonds of interdependence are being broken
mm,
because we're stuck on Zoom,
yep.
because we're no longer going into, well, some of us are, but a lot of us aren't going into physical places where we're bonding,
Mhm.
we're eating together at lunch, we're walking together, we're talking together and everything. We're breaking those bonds. And that is leading to anxiety.
Oh, totally.
And that's why people are in the state that they're in. They may be more productive, they may be earning more money, but contentment has left the building.
Oh, yeah. They're way less connected, truly connected, face to face connected with people.
Right. And if anything is particularly dangerous to us as a society, that is one of the most dangerous aspects because it's breaking up the interdependence.
Well, and it's like I think that certain people get it. You know, you see the way that there are folks who are brilliant at like, planning communities with a layout that actually facilitate that
Right.
interconnectedness, right? I think we're in a phase right now where people who know what's going on are in their own ways trying to undo the damage that we've done in
Right.
recent decades, right, with this isolationist business. And certain countries get it better than we do, certainly in the way that, the elderly are housed with the young, and there's much more interaction and community support. And there's a part of me that wants to remain hopeful that we can figure it out and
I think we
create
will. I think we
create
will.
movements like that
Well,
help us all do better.
as a species, we seem to be following an interesting pattern that we're maturing as a species as well as individuals. And as a species, when we're matured enough to create the problem, it seems that we've matured enough to create a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that this is a pattern that we're always in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at our history, that seems to be consistent. So I'm very optimistic, actually,
Mm-hmm.
that our ability to deal with the climate change, our ability to deal with the dangers posed by the AI
Mm-hmm.
revolution that's happening right now, and that's a whole.
Oh, we could have a whole separate podcast episode just on that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even going to get into it, but yes, there are. I have thoughts. Um,
Well, and
and
just as a microcosm of that, so for example, you look at what happened with cell phones, with social media platforms coming online, let's call it 2006, 2008, that time frame. And we've had enough time to see what happened. And now you have whole school districts and groups of parents moving away from phones at school, phones on kids, kids even having cell phones. And
right.
so I think there are some of us who are learning from what has been done not very well, and it's the opportunity that we continually have.
Well, we're either a part of nature
Mhm.
or we're staring into a cell phone. One is going to bring you contentment and joy in this world. The other one, not.
Yeah,
But not that I'm against cell phones. I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of being able to communicate with you like this. But like
totally.
everything has benefits and
Yeah,
consequences.
that's
If
right.
we're aware of the consequences, if we have clarity on what the consequences are, we can work with it.
Mhm.
If we judge them and push them away, we can't work with
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Well, and it's interesting because I obviously love being with people. I love being in person with people. COVID combined with motherhood, even combined with my work, it was like a collision of all these things that made that virtually impossible. And there are days that like Zoom saved me. I felt like I could be in the presence of people when I otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity at all to do that, right? So yeah, it
benefits.
is totally and it's because I'm sure we've got listeners that are like, there's not benefits to everything, this whole conversation around whether you call it balance, but it really is this
It's harmony,
benefits, yeah, benefits versus,
consequence.
pitfalls, risk, consequences. There we go. That's the word. Um, it was a guest that I've had, Dr. DeMartini. It reminds me of the DeMartini method, which was a really great exercise in looking at what are the things in life, particularly that people have done, maybe events that have harmed you, but actually examining very carefully how many positives came out of that. And if you're being honest with yourself and you're looking for them in balance to the negatives, you find that it's in balance,
It is. It
right?
is. If you don't judge it and you have unconditional acceptance, you will be able to see the benefits and you will be able to understand how to work with the consequences.
And if you're willing to look, it is one of the ways to get to unconditional acceptance,
Right.
right? Because a lot of people feel triggered around a certain person who harmed them or certain events, and it can be really hard to get to that place of acceptance. and doing the exercise of like actually examining what are the good things that have flowed from this can allow you to see, for example, my own role as a parent, like no doubt, even on my best of days, I will do some things that have negative consequences to my children. And I have to accept it all in balance. Like, regardless of the job I do, there will be positives, there will be negatives.
Right. And one of the issues with being a parent is you never know in the moment if you're doing
Which
the right or
one?
the wrong thing. You have no idea. I mean, the
Yes.
only way to tell is to raise this child again in parallel, making different
In a
decisions,
different
the
way.
outcome, and
That's
look at the
right.
outcome. And that's
That's
not possible. So
mm-mm.
relax. I mean, just do your best. And if things are moving in a positive direction, the child is thriving, okay, you may be doing something right, hopefully. And if they're not, you may be doing something wrong. Well, just change it. It's no big deal. Don't judge yourself for it. Just
Mm.
change what you're doing,
Yeah. So
right? People's
good.
first instinct when things aren't going in the right direction is judgment,
Oh, it's so easy to do. Yes, it's
right?
so easy to slip into that.
Or to blame others.
Hmm.
And both are a massive waste of energy. Not that they're good or bad. And you notice here, I'm not even judging the judging.
Right.
It's neither good or bad. It's a way. It's either you're gaining energy or you're losing energy, but it's never stop. You're never in a pause.
Hmm.
You're moving in a play in a way that your energy is moving with you, and you're gaining energy, or you're moving in a way that you're spending more than you're gaining, and that's a negative return.
Well, that's right. And even on the issue of judgment, there are plenty of instances where judgment is appropriate for that instance, right? We have biological judgment that saves
So
us. And
let's call it differently
hmm
because I that word is charged and
oh,
people may not
judgment,
understand
totally.
it. So let's call it differently. Let's call it analysis.
Analysis, yeah, even
Right.
discernment. Yep,
In that moment, right, as mostly prey animals,
yep,
we in a jungle, we've developed this ability to analyze a situation in a split second,
yep.
right? Friend or foe, fight or flight, or
That's
freeze,
it.
right?
Mhm.
And instant. And it's a split second. Now, what happens is judgment is analysis that never ends.
Mm,
So now, instead of listening to your instincts and just doing, creating action, you're sitting there and you're thinking about it and you're thinking about it and you're thinking
just
about it. And
remaining in judgment. Yes.
now imagine in the jungle we did that. How many tigers would eat us? All of them.
Yeah.
We would be the easiest prey ever, right? Because there is no time, especially in a crisis, to sit there and judge because that takes too much time. Analysis. I'm done. I'm moving, and that's it. Right?
Mm,
So judgment is really analysis plus emotions that doesn't end.
yeah.
Okay, so now we know that. Now we understand where the issue is. Great. Let's catch ourselves. If we keep thinking and saying over and over the same thing, we can try once in a while because you can't do it all the time. Once in a while, we're like, oh, all right, let's try a different way.
Mm,
Now, with Taoism, we always work with 1%. In other words, we're never trying to get to 10%, 20, 30, 100, nothing. What we're trying to do is help ourselves improve like less than 1%, 1% in a situation, 1 out of 100, that we
mhm.
actually catch ourselves and we're like, oh, that's what's happening right now. All right, let's move on. Got that. All right, maybe hopefully next week I'll try to catch it again. And then one day, all those 1% add up to 100%.
I love that. Feels so much more accessible, right? And doable.
Well,
And
think about in a gym. Let's say you have a goal of picking up 100 pounds,
mm,
and you tested your abilities, and you can only pick up 20. So the next step shouldn't be to try to pick up 40. It should be to pick up 21,
mm.
and the next week 22, and maybe the next week 23, right? And then one day you'll make it to 100. And if you don't, nobody's going to put on your tombstone, she didn't make it to 100.
Despite what we all think, right? I love that. Um, I mean, and I want to be so respectful of our time because I feel like we could just like go a whole nother hour, but a couple of concepts that I'd love to hear you just talk about briefly, especially in the context of working with your clients. And then I want to hear more about how you do that.
Mhm.
Um, is this idea around flow and seasons, like this balance, right? And I know we've touched on this briefly. I feel like, especially if you're a parent, that recognition and a mom for sure, that recognition of things happening in seasons. It's like,
Right.
right? We're in the
Well,
seasons of fall and kids getting all the colds at school and bringing them home. And also, it's the season of summer ending and people getting kind of full bore back into work,
right.
right?
Well, let's start with nature versus our society. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
an antagonistic relationship, it's just an understanding of how things are different. So in nature, as we get into winter, everything slows down. So spring is a time for mating, and summer is a time of abundance, right? And where we're trying to get as much energy as we can, we're trying to cultivate as much as we can. The bears try to eat as much so they gain as much weight as they can, right? So that as we get into fall and especially winter, we can slow down, use less energy so that it's there to help us get through the hard winter season. So, but our society, what it's doing is it's scheduling really big holidays at the end of fall and right in the middle of winter, when we should be slowing down and seeing less people, we actually have
Mm.
to speed up and see more people. That is going to naturally create anxiety.
Ugh.
Naturally. Now, should we cancel the holidays? No, we're not going to do that. It's an act of Congress, and there's a whole thing around, and lots of people are going to be upset. But what you can do is recognize it for what it is and understand that this is going to drain me more than it should simply because it's an unnatural state. Great. What should I do? Well, walk more.
Mm.
Between the time that you have to see people, see less people. Take walks by yourself. Sit in nature, look at trees, look at a lake, look at the ocean. Take your time to recharge. And some of the things I love to do is as I'm walking, I'd love to walk backwards. Not
Mm.
a lot, but the key to it is you can't look backwards. And one of the reasons is because you want to get your consciousness out of your eyes. Because of our screens, too much of our consciousness is sitting in our eyes and building up heat.
Uh,
And as we're walking backwards and we can't look backwards, a lot of that naturally starts to drain into grounding and through your feet into the ground. So it's not a lot. I take about 10 steps and and I turn around and I keep walking. And once in a while I'll do that one more time. And it's the simplest thing to do and it has the most incredible effect.
oh, that's amazing.
So
Yeah.
that's I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure if I answered your question the way you posed it, but that's what came up for me.
No, I love that actually. And that was a twist even on what I was thinking, but so appropriate. I mean, I think recognizing how profoundly we're actually impacted by natural cycles, by the seasons. Like so often what comes up for me is just seasons, whether it's like the season to play, the season to write, because summer for us is the season to play, whether you want to or not. You've got two kids at
Right?
home, right?
Right?
Um, and how when you work against those, it's just so much more challenging. And I can imagine in like the leadership roles and people that you work with,
Hmm.
that's a whole other conversation, right? When you're talking about corporate cycles and stuff. But I think that for like the audience that we're talking to that are small business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they may have built or are building small teams. They're not the Googles of the world, but these concepts are really important. And to the
Yes.
extent that they can honor those cycles and some of this natural ebb and flow, even in their business planning, the way that they schedule their work. I feel like it is once you learn it, once you see it, it's such a profound topic. I mean, my sister, who I referenced earlier, we talk often about our childhood and how like resting was not a thing we ever saw parents do. It was not a thing we did. Like this whole concept of balance and rest is something that we are learning for the first time in adulthood.
Right, right. And it is the consequences of the incredible society we built.
Yes.
There's incredible benefits. I mean, incredible benefits. Being able to turn on a faucet and not die from parasites,
Right.
taking a shower and not falling prey to diseases. You know, when you do get sick, there's people in the hospital who've dedicated their whole life to helping you.
Yeah.
I mean, and this goes on and on. There's insane benefits to what we've built, and it's gorgeous and it's amazing.
Mhm.
And with all the benefits, there are consequences. And it's just a matter of working with those consequences versus judging them. And I
Mm.
sound like a broken record. I know I do. But that's the only way to get through.
Yeah, no, people need to hear this and they need to hear it applied in different ways and different circumstances. I love it. I think it's such a powerful thing that once you see it, you just can't unsee it, right?
Right. And it's the same thing in business, whether it's a founder or an executive, is how do I show up? Right? And it all starts not with what you're doing, but who are you?
Mhm.
Right? What are your strengths? And one of the wonderful things about Taoism is one of the principles is limitations. Embrace your limitations. And why is
Mm,
that? When you are in a space of humility and understand that you've reached your limitations, yes, you can gently push on them. You can never break them, but you can push on them. You can expand them. That takes a lot of effort. Or
mm,
you can recognize that I've reached my limitations and this is where I ask for help.
yes. Yes.
And asking for help is one of the most important things you can do in an interdependent society.
Mm,
Because once you understand that this is out of your control and no longer your ability, you can go looking for a team member that is actually really, really good at what you suck at.
mm-hmm.
And they will go, hey, I'll solve. One second, I'm done with that. Awesome.
Right.
So I don't have to go and spend God knows how many hours trying to get better at something I'm still going to suck at, right?
Mm,
But this is why limitations are so important. But in the English language, though we hear negative connotations when we say limitations,
mm,
and they're actually the opposite. It's a very positive thing. It allows you to ask for help. So you can get whatever you need to get done faster. And the person that you've asked for help is going to be your friend because people love being asked,
yep.
especially what you're good at.
That's
Like you were
right.
asking me questions. I love you because I am really good at this. And I want to share that because that's the
Totally.
way I get to express it. And the way I derive value from it is when I share it. Right? So I'm a
Right.
huge fan of you now because you asked me about things that I'm good at.
Mm.
So you make a friend, your stuff gets done, and you've spent a lot less energy on it. How is that not a win-win?
Well, and this piece, what you just said, because I love this reframe around limitations, and I don't think we're in a society that naturally wants to think of it this way, but is seeing actually how positive it is to be at that point of recognizing your limitation, and also from an energy expenditure standpoint, this idea of like, oh, what else can I let go of? What else can I, whether it's a thought process, whether it's an energetic pattern, whether it's something related to work or parenting, right? It's
Right.
really makes you feel like you can take a bigger breath.
Yes. And I'll give you an example from your profession. One of the things I hear from lawyers that I work with the most is my clients don't listen to me.
Mm,
I mean, they could be paying you crazy amount of hours, I mean, per hour, and they're not listening. And they're not listening because they haven't actually embraced their own limitations and understanding that they don't know better. You have spent your life doing this. You know better. And I should be all my ears, all my senses should be trying to understand you and follow you because that is what you do best. And I have my limitations. I am not a lawyer. I do not know these things. And I have not spent years in a courtroom or around other lawyers and seeing things from different angles. That's not possible. I'm going to have like 10 more lifetimes, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that always amazed me is that is the number one thing I hear lawyers always talk about is that clients just don't listen.
Mm. It is a challenge. I luckily love my clients. I have had to fire just a couple in 22 years of practice. I've probably only fired, I don't know, less than one hand, two to four, and so I've had very good luck, but when you recognize that in a client, I'm very quick to be like, I'm sorry, I'm not the one to help you. Right? It's just, I'm not the one to help you if this is how it is. And so it's also, again, very powerful to recognize the truth of
Right.
that and your own limitation in being able to put more effort into that client that is going to take too much effort and too much time and too much
Or
frustration.
maybe it's not even possible. You've done your best.
Mm-hmm.
Everything beyond your best is not possible.
That's
So
right.
when you recognize that, right? When you recognize that I've done my best with this client, you are free. That is freedom right there because you no longer have to try. You have done your best and you are at the end of your limitations when it comes to this process, whatever it is. And now you can, with a clear conscience, let the client go because there's nothing more you could have done.
Yep.
Or you could keep hitting your head against the wall,
Oh my gosh.
getting
And how many
paid,
people listening, like in whatever their version of their work life is, that recognize this feeling of like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what it is.
right?
Yeah.
And that's all the journey inward. So in
Yep.
Taoism, we never really, I mean, the outside world we look at for flows and understanding what the
Mm.
environment is, but all our cues we take from ourselves. So there's
Mm.
nobody ever to blame. If I wind up with a business partner that did very unpleasant things, I'm the one who chose to be with a scorpion. And then I chose
Right.
to expect that scorpion to have a different, to go against their nature.
It's so true.
So who's silly here?
It's so true. Like when my clients have a rough interaction or scenario with their own clients, I'm always helping them look like, what, let's talk about the red flags that you saw that you just ignored. They're
Or if
always
you
there.
didn't see them, or if you didn't see them, let's talk about how you can
Right.
get better at seeing them.
Totally. Totally. But often they saw them and then they looked away. That is most often
If
the
I'm
pattern.
paying him so much, it's probably my own experience why I'm saying this. I'm paying him so much, he'd never go behind my back. I mean, why would he want to lose all that money? Oh, he went behind my back. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. See, this is me now talking from my experience. But it takes all those experiences to understand that how what is the right way to go.
That's
And
right.
when I was young, like everybody else, I would blame others.
Yeah.
And then I learned that I'm the one who's picking these people.
Mm. Oh, such a profound learning. Um, I would love to hear how you work with, I know you do a variety of things in supporting your
Sure.
clients, like, and I know in a variety of areas, leadership, transitioning through crisis, which is
Hmm.
significant. And I think a lot of people have faced that in their own way in the past few years or are still facing it. Um, Talk to me about who your clients are, how you work with them, right? Who are your favorite people to work with?
Well, because they most reflect my journey in life, obviously
Hmm.
entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Because I have the most language in common with them.
Hmm.
And a very close second are CEOs, executives. I really enjoy working with lawyers because I work with their clients to help them through a crisis.
Mm.
And I actually wrote a book. It's called Outlast on how to get through crisis. And I wrote it from my own experience. I had a legal crisis, I had a health crisis,
Mm.
um, and I had all those, so you don't have to. Uh,
Right? If it were only so easy, we all just get to skip our own crises. Yeah.
But what it taught me is how to get through those using the Taoist tools.
Mm,
And what it taught, so what I when I wrote the book, I wrote it there. The whole book is really Taoist tools,
mhm.
not talking about Taoist tools. So
I
no
love
talking
it.
about Fight Club.
I
Uh,
love it.
and I used them to get through the crisis. And I talked about how to get while being in the middle of it, while being on
Mhm.
the other side of it. Um, so I enjoy working with people who are in crisis, not because they're in crisis. That's not the
Yep.
enjoyable part. The enjoyable part is helping them realize the opportunities in this situation. And it is very much counterintuitive how to win in a crisis. So
Mm,
everybody wants to get out of the crisis as fast as possible. And that is the best way to lose. The most amazing way to get through a crisis is by recognizing that it's a marathon
yeah.
and that life is never going to change. This is the way it's always going to be. So, what do I have to do to adapt to this situation if it's never going to change? And that's the opportunity in
Mm,
it. And the person who can last in the crisis the longest will last to, I guarantee I've seen this over and over, including my life, will last to get to an inflection point where things go their way.
yeah. Well, it is when you think about, like, I think about some of the physical crises I've been in, and those moments of like, and the interesting thing is I'm having a shift right now of you saying like you actually need to adopt this, like, what if it's this way forever? How do I
Mhm.
adapt? And the mantra that I had is like, you know what? And maybe this is the wrong way, but it won't be this way forever. I don't know when it's going to change. It won't be forever. How do I just get through right now? How do I just
It's
take the
close.
next
It's
step?
close.
Right?
The reality is it won't be forever.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. But
Yeah.
you want to set your system into not looking at the future because then you're diverting your energy.
That's right. Well, and this is it for anybody. And I think a health crisis comes to mind because it's so poignant when you're in those moments in your body where things feel terrible and you're like, I really don't know if I'm going to survive this. Like all you have is the moment right now and then the next one and then the next one, right? And it
You're the
is,
1%.
what was that?
The 1%.
Yeah,
Don't look for the
totally.
100% for everything to change. What can I do right now that can achieve me a 1% difference?
That's right. Yeah,
And that's very achievable.
yeah, it's significant, but I think it is one of the skills that actually help people get through in a way that they can be proud of,
Right.
right? That they can feel like they didn't have to sacrifice themselves or their sanity or their
Well, not for
belief.
a long time.
Uh,
In short bursts, yes.
Yeah, totally. We all do in some ways. But yeah, first of all, I love the title of your book, Outlast. We will be sure to share that and any other links that you want us to share. I think that it's super appropriate since you're on the podcast Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I do really personally love stories about perseverance and how people get through because it's absolutely essential for entrepreneurship. It's absolutely essential for being human.
Absolutely. In everybody's life, there's no such thing as you're not going to get into a crisis.
Yeah.
It's just you may not recognize it, but
Yeah.
in fact, it was really interesting. One of the people helping me with the book, editing it, said to me at the end of the book, he goes, "I never realized I was in a crisis until I read your book."
Isn't that
And that's
fascinating?
because it sneaks up slowly over time,
Mm,
and we gently adapt to it until we're in a full-blown crisis without really understanding it because it's like, what is that boiling frog
boiling the
slowly?
frog. Well, I think particularly in the context of relationships,
Hmm.
you see that time and time again. I think you probably can see it in employment as
Yes,
well. People that
absolutely.
stay for a very long time and realize like I'm completely unhappy doing this work.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Or you see it in teams where a certain person no longer belongs in that team.
Mm.
But because of whatever loyalty or history or anything else, we allow that person to continue to the detriment of both the person and the team.
And the team. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's so significant. Well, we will pop the link of that book, Outlast, into the show notes. And folks, if you're listening, you know where the show notes are. Go to legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Find Master Arthur Levitan's episode. We will have a link to your website, your book. Arthur, are you on social media? Do you show up other places
Not,
online?
not really. People are trying to get me to post more things and everything.
It's a good answer. I really love people who don't show up on social media because secretly I would like for that to be me as well. I'll get there. I think I'll get there. But
One of the things
it's
that I can offer is I've started my series of Qigong on Zoom
oh
again.
yes, yes.
And for those who are interested, the practice is thousands of years old, and the reason it survived is because it's worked. It's a female energy practice to counteract the stress of the male energy world. And it does amazing things. And even once a week, it is incredible what it does for health and for peace of mind.
Well, I'm looking forward to trying it with you. I know I was going to show up this week. And then speaking of health, my daughter's health threw us a little curveball, but
Totally understand.
the way you described it, which I loved, and I want people to hear if they're not familiar with Qigong, is how it elongates your breath. And just
Yes.
that concept of elongating breath, like as a mom, as a worker bee some days, as an attorney, I know how much and how easily I can get into a place of not breathing as deeply and as fully as I should. So I'm
And
super
we all do.
excited. Yeah.
We all do. There's nobody who
Welcome to
doesn't.
modern life, right?
Right. And that's the consequences, and but we can work with it if we recognize
Right.
it.
I love it. So I'm super excited about trying that out. We will share that link as well to the Qigong. Or do they just get in touch with you? Did I maybe say that wrong? Is there a
I
link
think
to
I
it?
think the website quantumdao.org,
Okay.
quantumtfo.org, I think it
Has a sign up link or
I
something.
think it has
Okay.
a sign up, or it should. We'll find out.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Well, we'll find out.
Otherwise,
Regardless, we will let people know how to find it in the show
yes,
notes, which will be super
yes.
fun.
And my email is in your notes, so they can get in
Okay.
touch.
Perfect. So yeah, pop over to legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. We will share access to Arthur's book. We will share links to the however you get there to the Qigong practice if you would like to test it out. I'm super excited about that. Arthur, it's been such a joy to have you here and to talk about, all everything that's come up. Is there anything on your mind, a final thought, a quote, a takeaway you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Don't be alone.
Mm,
That is the first chapter of my book, and I try to live by it. Don't be alone. You're not
mm.
designed that way.
No, no, I love that. Don't be alone. It's again, I mean, a topic for a whole other episode. All the studies on longevity about what really matters, right? Is it that you drink buttermilk or beer, or is it that you are surrounded by friends? Yeah,
Right.
totally, totally.
Take a walk with a friend. That's the most
Absolutely.
loveliest thing. Or your child. That's the loveliest thing ever.
Yeah, I love it. Arthur, I so appreciate you. I am grateful to have you in my world now and know about your work and who you are in the world. So I'm super excited to introduce folks to you and send some new followers your way. So thank you very much for your time today.
Appreciate it.